Yo, what's good? It's Andrew from travelingguitarist.com. Today I'm talking to you guys about nylon string guitars and whether or not nylon strings are easier to play. And right away I have to say that yes, I would say they are easier to play simply because nylon string guitars, they use fabric. You know, it's not a metal. The strings are made out of a fabric, nylon, rather than steel or brass or nickel like electric guitars and acoustic guitars are. So like if you see my nylon right here, that's why they kind of have that like warm sound and character to them. Because it's literally a fabric. It's not like a steel. It's not a steel that reverberates and is bright, you know? Like brass is very bright. It's a very bright sound. That's why if you put a brass nut on a guitar, for example, it tends to make it a lot more bright, as I just said. And, you know, they sound like most people don't do that anymore, from what I understand. But I think there was a time when there was a lot of nuts that were brass. But, Anyway, but yeah, nylon string guitars I would say are definitely much easier than an acoustic guitar or an electric guitar to play. However, the one area where an electric guitar actually is a lot easier to play is where in the action. So like a nylon string, for example, like the action is it's quite high. I don't know if you can like see that, but like the strings are quite far away from the fretboard. Now, this is also a very cheap nylon string guitar. So that's that's like a consequence of this model specifically, probably. And when you compare that to an electric guitar, like the action is like much closer to the frets, right? So it's easier to play in that regard. But if you're a beginner and your fingers aren't used to the pressure on your fingers, then it actually might be more difficult to play an electric guitar just because it's going to hurt your fingers. So anyway, what I would say is that like an electric guitar is actually easier to play than a nylon string guitar if you're used to playing the guitar. But if you're not used to playing the guitar and you're a total beginner, then a nylon string is easier to play. And the reason for that is just because of the softness of the strings, right? Because, I mean, after a while, your fingers, they just get used to the fact that the strings are tough and they're hard against your fingers. And once they're used to that, then it's no longer a factor. So then you're going to want a lower action rather than a higher action and softer strings. And, nylon string guitars are kind of interesting for that reason. I find that I actually learned recently that nylon string guitars, they're gauged much differently. And I never noticed this before, but these are my strings right here, like you can see in this image right here. These Pro Arte Diodario classical guitar strings. And I didn't realize that they were like this, like just normal tension. Like there's like light tension, and then there's normal tension, and then there's heavy tension, right? Which is very odd. I didn't realize that was a thing, even though I own several pairs of them. But so if you take a look at this tension guideline that I've made right here, this is coming from Diodario's guidelines, or whatever you want to call it, their metric by which they judge light, normal, hard, whatever you want to say. But you'll notice that the difference between the gauges are not that pronounced. Like you have your light 27.5, normal 28.0, hard 28.5. Now if you compare that to an electric guitar string, like it can go up from like 9 to 11 to 12 to even 13. It goes up like full digits. And the same thing with this with the B string as well, like 31.7, 0.01 31.7, 0.0322, 0.0327. So the difference between the gauges are not that different. So when it goes up from light to normal to hard, I guess it's like they spread the amount of tension on the guitar neck. They spread the amount of tension on the guitar neck evenly, I guess, which that seems to be the case with nylon string guitars. So it's kind of cool. And just another point that I think that's worth mentioning, and that's that it's what I said before, and that's that, nylon string guitars aren't always easier to play, especially if you're using like finger style, which is the way it's supposed to be played. And more importantly, as I said before, it's the action. Like the action is going to make a huge difference in terms of its playability. If the action is bad, then I mean, if the action is very high, it's going to be much more difficult to play. However, if the strings are softer, the strings are going to be much easier on your fingers if you're a beginner. Anyway, I hope this was helpful to you in terms of illustrating what nylon guitar strings are like. I would say just to wrap everything up, they're easier to play for a beginner because they're not as tough on your strings. But if you're more familiar with the instrument and you're fairly accustomed to playing the guitar, then you're going to want a lower action instead. So an electric guitar would be easier to play at that point. But anyway, make sure you like and subscribe, and then I'll see you in the next video. All right, peace.